I knew the ground was coming for me before I even felt it. But nothing prepared me for the sound of my granddaughter laughing as I hit the steps. The pain in my hip was sharp, but the sting of that laughter cut deeper, so cleanly it almost took my breath away. For a moment, I just lay there, palms scraped, skirt twisted, trying to catch the air that had been knocked out of me. The winter wood of the porch smelled damp, the way it used to after my husband oiled it each spring. Back then, someone would have rushed to help me. Now, someone rushed only to record it. "Grandma, seriously?" Mia's voice, bright, careless, unbothered, floated above me. I looked up. She stood over me with her phone raised, angling it like a professional, framing my humiliation as if it were some harmless family joke. "Hold on, this is going to go viral," she giggled. I didn't answer. At my age, silence is sometimes the only shield left. I pushed myself up, ignoring the throbbing that shot through my left leg. Her laughter followed me the way cold follows old bones. Inside, the house welcomed me with its familiar stillness, a stillness I'd grown used to since the day my son and his wife decided my presence was optional. Mia shoved past me on her way in, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "You should have seen your face, Grandma," she said. "That was gold." She didn't wait for a response. She never did. The girl I once held against my chest, singing her to sleep, now walked past me as though I were nothing but old wallpaper peeling from the corners, easy to ignore, easy to mock. I lowered myself into the armchair, gripping the wooden armrest until the ache in my hip dulled. The room felt colder. Or maybe that was just me realizing, again, how far children can drift from the people who raise them. Mia clattered around the kitchen, humming to herself. I closed my eyes, listening to cups hitting the counter, the refrigerator door slamming, a careless rhythm that used to drive me mad when she was little and sloppy. Back then, though, she'd look at me with those big brown eyes and say, "Sorry, Grandma," and it meant something. Now her apologies were reserved for her friends when her phone battery died. I leaned forward to inspect my knee. The skin was torn, a small trickle of blood tracing a thin path toward my sock. Nothing serious, though at 77, even a bruise feels like a betrayal of the body. I breathed slowly, evenly, the way the physical therapist had taught me after last year's fall. That was the first one. This one felt different. This one wasn't an accident. It was a warning. When I heard Mia's voice again, she was on a call. "Yeah, I got it on video," she said, her tone airy, delighted. "No, seriously, she just went down, like, boom." Laughter erupted from the phone's speaker. More laughter from her. They fed off each other, like children poking a stray cat just to see it flinch. I stared at the framed photographs on the mantel. Mia at 8, holding a seashell. Mia in her graduation gown. Me, smiling beside her, holding flowers I'd paid for, standing under the sun of a day I thought meant something to her. I'd spent years supporting her, tuition, books, a car she'd promised to take good care of. No one had filmed those things. Kindness rarely makes the camera roll. My hip pulsed again. I steadied myself against the chair, breathing slow until the room stopped trembling around the edges. That girl didn't even check if I'd broken anything. The thought sat bitter on my tongue. When did simple decency become optional? She came into the living room and leaned on the doorframe, chewing gum, phone still in hand. "Grandma, don't be weird about it. It's just a video." "Is it?" I asked softly. She rolled her eyes, a skill she'd perfected under her mother's tutelage. Please, you're being dramatic. Funny, I thought. I'd said nothing dramatic at all. She disappeared again, and I heard the chime of a notification. Her friends responding, no doubt. My humiliation spreading in little glowing rectangles across the city. I sat there a long time after she went upstairs, listening to the faint thump of music through the ceiling. My leg hurt, but something else hurt more. An old ache, the kind that grows quietly through the years, watered by every small disrespect. I thought of my son, of how he'd grown distant, polite in that clipped way that means the affection has drained out, and only duty remains. Of my daughter-in-law, who always smiled too sweetly when she told me what I shouldn't worry about. Of Mia, who had inherited their indifference but sharpened it into cruelty. The house ticked softly. My breath settled. A strange calmness spread through me, slow but certain. I had spent a lifetime absorbing small cuts. But this moment, this laugh, this fall, felt like the first time the wound reached something vital. Something I'd kept quiet for too long. Whatever happens next, I thought, I won't let this be another thing I swallow in silence. I may be old, but I am not done. The house always feels larger after someone wounds you in it. The walls listen differently. Even the clock ticks with a kind of distance, as if it too has decided to look the other way. I eased myself up from the armchair and limped toward the kitchen, wanting ice for my knee, though mostly I wanted something cold to quiet the heat under my skin. On the counter sat Mia's empty glass, a smear of lipstick on its rim. Bright, careless, the same color she wore at 15 when she first told me I talked too slow. I remember the sting of that comment, how I laughed it off and said age makes you deliberate. She had shrugged then, the same shrug she uses now before dismissing me entirely. I wrapped ice in a dish towel and pressed it to my knee. The ache eased, but the heaviness in my chest did not. I stared at the small puddle forming on the tile, the melted droplets slipping down like quiet tears, and caught myself whispering, "When did it get like this?" The question didn't need an answer. I'd watched the distance form year by year, first an inch, then a yard, and now so wide you could build a bridge and still never meet in the middle. When Mia was young, she adored me. She'd fall asleep with her head in my lap, tug me toward her school plays, scribble love notes on scraps of colored paper. But her mother's voice carved deep grooves in her, little remarks about my old-fashioned ways, my modest house, my cooking that wasn't healthy enough. Comments made with a smile, but I've lived long enough to recognize the smile of a woman who sharpens herself against others. My son never defended me. He'd just sigh and tell me, "Mom, don't take things so personally," though there's no other way to take disrespect except personally. I shifted the ice, wincing as my hip protested. I wasn't injured badly, I reminded myself. I'd fallen worse before, but never in front of someone who found entertainment in the sound of my suffering. I stood and moved to the sink, running my hands under warm water, watching the last bits of that winter chill slip from my skin. My reflection in the little window above the sink caught my eye. Hair more silver than gray now, soft lines around my mouth. Eyes that used to be bright, but today looked clouded. "Get up," I murmured. Not to my knees, but to myself. Old habits. When life buckles you, you straighten your spine before your heart notices. Upstairs, Mia was laughing again, this time on a video call. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but even muffled behind a closed door, I could make out the mocking tone. "I swear, she fell like a sack of flour. Yes, I filmed it. Wait, hold on, I'll send it." My throat tightened. The girl had not even waited an hour before turning my pain into a performance. It's strange, the moments when your life splits into a before and an after. Not loud moments, not dramatic ones, but the small ones where someone shows you exactly who they've become. I walked slowly back to the living room, passing the hallway where family pictures lined the wall. So many versions of Mia smiled at me from those frames. Little hands in mine. Birthday candles. Her first day of college, when she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. I couldn't have done it without you." Those words had warmed me for months. Now they felt like lines from a play performed by an actress who no longer remembered her role. I reached the last picture at the end of the hallway, my husband and me on the day we moved into this house. He stood behind me, arms around my waist. Both of us younger, lighter, untouched by disappointments we couldn't have imagined. I pressed 2 fingers to the glass. "You'd have said something," I whispered. "You'd have told them to stop." He'd never tolerated unkindness, and perhaps that was why the ache of missing him felt so alive tonight. I returned to the armchair, the one constant in a home that had changed in every other way. My body settled into it with a sigh, and I felt the familiar little click in my hip. I should have been resting, yet instead, my mind replayed the fall, the laughter, the lens pointed at me. I remembered the brief moment before I hit the ground, a moment where I thought she might reach for me, just out of instinct, just out of basic human decency. But instinct had left her long ago, and decency, well, that had never taken root. After a while, I heard her feet on the stairs, the light patter of youth, unburdened and unthinking. She appeared in the doorway again, her phone in her hand, face glowing with the satisfaction of someone who has no idea what they've broken. "Grandma," she said, "my friends want to know if you'll do more videos like that. It's hilarious." I looked at her. Really looked. The gum chewing, the impatience, the dismissive curl of her lip. A child raised on comfort, fed by my sacrifices, now amused by the woman who'd carried her through every hardship she never felt. "You should go rest," she added. "Old people bruise like peaches." Something in me shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, just a quiet, irreversible click, like a lock sliding into place. "Good night, Mia," I said, my voice steady. She shrugged and went upstairs again, leaving the lights on, leaving doors half open, leaving the house in the same disarray she always did. But she left something else too, the clear understanding that whatever I had allowed all these years had grown into the very thing hurting me now. I sat there long after she disappeared, my hand over the bruised knee, my breath slow and deliberate. And somewhere between one breath and the next, the truth finally settled. This wasn't the worst they'd done to me. It was just the first time I couldn't pretend it didn't matter. By morning, the bruise had bloomed across my knee like a dark, ugly flower. I've had bruises before. Years shape you into someone who doesn't flinch at every ache, but this one carried a different weight. It wasn't just the fall. It was everything that had led to it, everything that followed. I made myself tea, though the kettle felt heavier than usual. The steam touched my face, soft and warm, reminding me of all the mornings when Mia would sit at this very table, short legs dangling, begging for sugar cubes. Now she woke up past 10 and rarely came downstairs without headphones on. She didn't come down that morning either. not even to ask how I felt, not even to glance at me. Silence has become her way of saying, I don't matter. I was rinsing my cup when my phone buzzed. Notifications kept coming, one, then another, then another. I frowned. At my age, phones feel like tiny, needy creatures always demanding your attention. I dried my hands and checked the screen. At the top was a message from a neighbor's daughter, someone I barely knew. Mrs. Ward, are you okay? Then another. I saw the video. That fall looked serious. Did you get help? My stomach sank. I tapped the link in confusion, not quite believing what I was seeing. But there it was. My fall. My body hitting the steps. Mia's laugh echoing like a spark catching dry grass. The angle was unflattering. Of course it was. She hadn't intended kindness. Her commentary was loud, delighted. Grandma, just eat it on the stairs. There were hundreds of comments already, some laughing, some mocking, some making jokes about old people physics, and a few, very few, expressing concern, the kind that feels more like pity than empathy. I watched myself fall again, as if looking at a stranger. It's strange, seeing your pain through someone else's lens. It reveals things you don't want to accept. How fragile you look, how alone you seem, how easily people can reshape your suffering into entertainment. I pressed my hand to the counter until my fingers whitened. The ice yesterday had eased the physical pain. Nothing could ease this. I opened the comments again, not out of morbid curiosity, but because part of me needed to understand what exactly my granddaughter had unleashed. Lol, she fell like a tree. Why didn't the old lady hold the railing? Send part 2, OMG. Bro, that laugh is evil. Is she okay? That looked really bad. Who films their grandma falling? That last comment clung to me like a burr. Someone out there still had sense. But Mia apparently didn't see it that way. Her footsteps thundered down the stairs, each step full of the arrogance of a teenager who believes the world loves her because it hasn't yet shown her consequences. She practically danced into the kitchen. Grandma, the video hit 30,000 views overnight. Isn't that crazy? I didn't answer. It's already on 2 meme pages, she added proudly, scrolling with a grin. People are dying over it. I turned slowly, letting myself look at her. Not the girl she had been, but the young woman she'd chosen to become. Self-satisfied, thoughtless, detached. Mia, I said quietly, why would you post something like that? She blinked at me, surprised I wasn't joining her enthusiasm. It's funny. People post funny stuff. That's how the internet works. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive. A word people use when they don't want to admit they've hurt you. You could have helped me, I said. You could have checked if I was hurt. Her jaw tightened with irritation, the kind teenagers wear like armor. I knew you were fine. How? I asked. I just knew, she muttered, looking away for the first time. She didn't know. She didn't care. I reached for the phone still in her hand, not to take it, just to touch her wrist, to bring her eyes back to me. Mia, take it down. She jerked her arm away as if my skin burned. No way. Everyone's already seen it. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. My humiliation, my injury, my dignity, shrunk into a not a big deal. She stood there waiting for me to let it go. That's what she'd always expected. That's what everyone in my family had always counted on. But something clicked inside me again, sharper this time. I'm asking you, I repeated. Take it down. Grandma, she said with an exasperated sigh. Stop. You're being dramatic again. The word again stung far more than the fall. How many times had she dismissed my pain with that same tone? How many times had I swallowed it, convincing myself she was just young, just going through phases, just echoing her mother? No. This was not a phase. This was a choice. I walked past her, steadying myself on the table, though not for balance, just to keep from saying something I might regret. My knee throbbed, but something deeper pulsed louder. As I left the room, Mia called after me, "Don't worry, Grandma. You'll get used to it." People exaggerate everything online. But I wasn't worried. And I wasn't getting used to anything. Upstairs in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the sunlight touch the curtains. My breath was slow, steady, but underneath it was a quiet storm gathering itself. This wasn't the first time Mia had laughed at my misfortune, but it was the first time she'd invited the whole world to laugh with her, and I finally understood something. If I didn't stop this now, it would get worse. Much worse. Sometimes the moment you reach the bottom is the moment you finally decide to stand up. And I was standing. By afternoon, the house felt too small for the weight of everything pressing on my chest. I moved slowly, not because of the pain in my knee, though it was swelling now, a dark bruise spreading like spilled ink, but because every step seemed to echo with the same question. How long have I allowed them to treat me this way? The answer, years, sat bitter on my tongue. I went to my sewing room, a small space at the back of the house that still smelled faintly of fabric and lavender sachets. It was the only room Mia never entered. There was nothing in it she wanted. I pulled the cord on the window blind and watched a blade of afternoon light fall across the floor. Dust motes drifted in it, calm and slow, as if time itself moved differently here. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the drawer I had avoided for months, and pulled out the thick folder I kept hidden there. My name written on the cover in my late husband's hand, from years ago. Helen, important papers. I sat down, the chair creaking under me, and opened it. Bills, receipts, bank statements, loan agreements, transfers. A decade's worth of financial lifelines I had extended to my son and his family. I had kept every record not because I meant to use them, but because George always said, "Paper remembers when people forget." People had forgotten a great deal. I flipped through the pages slowly. A tuition bill for Mia's second semester, $4,800. I paid it because her parents needed a little time to get ahead. A car payment, 3 late fees included, paid by me. A medical bill from an ER visit years ago when Mia sprained her ankle. I remember holding her hand in the waiting room, listening to her cry. I paid that one too. Then the bigger ones. The down payment on their townhouse when my son said he wanted a home his daughter could be proud of. $30,000. I'd wired it without hesitation, wanting him to feel secure. The credit card debt he and his wife racked up unexpectedly. $12,000. The monthly grocery allowance during the year my son was between jobs. Line after line, amount after amount, each page more painful than the last, not because of the money itself, but because of the trust behind it. All the times I believed my support would somehow bring us closer. That giving would remind them I was part of their lives. But the truth stared back at me from the paper. The more I gave, the less they saw me. I came across a small yellow note tucked between statements, a scribble I'd written years ago. "She'll appreciate this when she's older." I touched the ink lightly, feeling the foolishness of it pulse through my fingertips. Mia hadn't appreciated anything. She saw my help as a bottomless well, something she could drink from without ever wondering who filled it. Another page, another expense. Phone upgrades, laptop repairs, weekend trips, sorority fees, textbooks she never returned, new clothes she needed for internships. When my husband died, I once thought the saddest day of my life had passed. But there are other kinds of grief. Slow ones, quiet ones that grow with each dismissed call and each careless laugh until they hollow you out from the inside. I closed the folder carefully, smoothing the cover with my hand. For the first time in many years, the documents didn't represent burden or duty. They represented evidence, proof, history, truth. And truth can be a powerful thing, even when spoken by an old woman. As I set the folder aside, I heard Mia's footsteps upstairs, quick, impatient. Her music thumping faintly. Another video playing, probably showing off someone else's misfortune for entertainment. I pressed my palm to my knee. The bruise had darkened, swelling around the edges. The fall replayed in my mind, her laugh sharp as glass. The way she angled the camera, the way she didn't even think to reach for me. She'd filmed me like she was filming a stranger on the street. Not family. Not someone who'd spent years trying to make her life easier. Not someone who loved her. I steadied myself with a breath, and then another. Somewhere beneath all the humiliation, something new. No, not new, long buried, had begun to rise. A strength I hadn't used in years. A firmness I had allowed to atrophy. Not anger, not vengeance. Clarity. There was a time when my voice carried weight in this house. When my hands were the ones that kept us fed, clothed, safe. When my support meant something other than a convenient resource. If they had forgotten that, then I would remind them. Not through shouting. I was too old for shouting. Through honesty. Through consequence. Through the very thing they never expected me to reach for. My own dignity. As I gathered the papers back into the folder, I realized something important. Yesterday, Mia had filmed me falling. But today, I was the one who had finally gotten up. And I wasn't sitting back down. By early evening, the house had settled into that late-day quiet. The kind that feels too thin, like a blanket that no longer reaches your feet. I sat in the living room, folder on my lap, breathing slowly while the last of the sunlight slid across the carpet. I'd spent hours thinking about what Mia had done, what my son had allowed, what I myself had excused for too many years. It was time to speak. Mia came down first, her hair in a messy bun, her thumbs tapping at her phone like she was trying to beat it into submission. She barely glanced at me before walking toward the kitchen. "Mia," I said calmly, "sit for a moment. I want to talk to you." She froze, shoulders tensing. Teenagers hate being summoned by adults. It threatens the illusion that they control the world. She sighed loudly, as if the request cost her something precious, and slumped into the chair across from me. "Okay, what now?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Is this about the video again?" "Yes," I said simply. "It is." She groaned, dropping her head back dramatically. "Grandma, for real? Everyone posts stuff online. Nobody thinks it's that serious." "I think it's serious." "Well, you're the only one." That line hit harder than she knew, because it was the truth. For years, I had been the only one who took my pain seriously. I placed the folder on the table between us. Her gaze flicked to it, bored, uninterested, She had no idea what lived inside those pages. "Mia," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you hurt me. Not just by laughing, not just by filming, but by sharing it with the world. You humiliated me." She shrugged. "It's not like anyone knows who you are." "I know who I am," I answered softly. She didn't respond. I opened the folder, letting the papers fall into neat stacks. Bills, bank transfers, tuition receipts, credit card statements. Mia stared at them with mild confusion. "What is all this?" "This," I said, touching the top page, "is my love for you, my support, everything I've done for your family over the last 10 years. She frowned, shifting in her chair. "Why are you showing me this?" "So you understand the full picture," I said. "Kindness deserves respect, Mia, not ridicule." She sighed again, annoyed. "Grandma, stop being so dramatic. You're acting like I committed a crime." Her words sat in the air, cold and heavy. I looked at her carefully. "You recorded an elderly person falling. You laughed. You posted it. That is emotional harm, Mia. That is negligence. And the world saw it. It was just a joke." "It wasn't funny," I said. "Not to me. Not to anyone who understands dignity." She opened her mouth, then closed it. A flicker of something, defensiveness, maybe even guilt, crossed her face, but she buried it beneath the usual teenage indifference. The door opened then. My son, Lucas, walked in with that impatient stride he always used when stepping through my doorway, as if he were already late for something more important. "Mom," he said, barely glancing at me, "can I talk to you?" He saw the folder and his eyes narrowed. His hand closed around the back of a chair, the way a man grips a railing before a storm. "What's this about?" he asked sharply. I motioned for him to sit. He didn't. That was fine. He hadn't sat with me in years unless he needed something. "I saw the video," I said, "and I want you to tell me why your daughter thinks it's acceptable to treat me that way." Lucas stiffened. "Mom, don't start. It's just a stupid clip. Kids today do stuff like that." "Kids learn from their parents," I said, eyes steady on his. He flinched. A small movement, but I caught it. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "Mia told me you're upset, so—" He exhaled, irritated. "I'm here. What do you want?" What did I want? To rewind time? To feel valued? To be treated like family instead of a burden? But I had learned not to ask for fantasies. "I want accountability," I said softly. Mia scoffed. Lucas pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mom, please don't make this bigger than it is." I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I barely recognized. "You let your daughter think mocking an elderly woman is normal," I said. "That tells me exactly how little you see me." "Mom," he snapped, "stop playing the victim." Those words, spoken so flatly, so easily, almost knocked the wind out of me. But I had braced myself for them. I reached into the folder and pulled out one sheet, the first tuition payment I'd ever made for Mia. I laid it on the table, then another and another, the loans, the house down payment, the medical bills, the car repairs. Quiet, undeniable evidence of a decade of love. Lucas's eyes tightened. "Why are you bringing all this up?" "Because," I answered, "you both seem to have forgotten who held this family together." "That's not fair." "Neither is filming your grandmother falling down the stairs," I replied. Silence fell. Mia looked away. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. Shame edged the room, though both of them tried to hide from it. "For years," I said, voice slow, even, "I've supported you financially. I've helped you when you struggled. I've helped Mia become who she is. And this is how I'm treated. Mia didn't mean anything by it, Lucas muttered. And what do you mean by your silence? I asked. He didn't answer. Nobody did. In that silence, I felt the balance shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a door clicking shut. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging them to see me. I was simply telling the truth, and they didn't know what to do with a woman who finally stopped apologizing for being alive. Night settled over the house like a heavy blanket, but I felt more awake than I had in years. After Lucas and Mia went upstairs, both stomping, both muttering, I stayed in the living room, listening to the old clock measuring out the silence between us. Every tick reminded me of something I had ignored for too long. I didn't owe these people endless forgiveness. My knee throbbed, and I pressed a warm cloth to it, watching the bruise deepen into purples and greens. At my age, you learn to read pain the way sailors read weather. This one wasn't dangerous, just honest. It told the truth even when my family didn't. I looked at the folder again. The papers inside seemed to breathe with me, steady and patient. Evidence isn't emotional, it just is. Facts don't tremble. People do. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I found myself reaching for my old address book, flipping through its worn pages until I found the number I hadn't dialed in years. Arthur Cole, attorney at law, a man with white hair, a soft voice, and the patience to untangle any problem, back when I still believed problems could be solved with polite conversations. My fingers hesitated only once before pressing the call button. He answered on the second ring. Helen? Well, this is a voice I didn't expect today. Arthur, I said quietly, I need some advice. That softened him immediately. Tell me what's happened. I didn't tell him everything at once. When you're hurt, words come slowly, the way old doors open. I told him about the fall, the laugh, the video, the comments, the years of financial support, the disrespect thick as dust in my home. He didn't interrupt, only breathed, long and low. Helen, he said finally, do you still have the video? It's everywhere, I murmured. I couldn't erase it if I tried. That's good, he said gently. Not what happened, of course, but that it exists. That matters. I closed my eyes. I thought maybe I was overreacting. You aren't, he said. In fact, you've been underreacting for years. The truth in his tone pulled something tight inside me. Tight, then released, like a knot finally loosening. Helen, you know this isn't just about a fall, he continued. This is about neglect, emotional abuse, possibly financial exploitation, and we can pursue all of that. If you're ready. Was I ready? I looked around my living room, my home of 40 years, a place once filled with laughter, with my husband's deep voice, with Mia's little footsteps, and my own dreams for this family. Now it felt like a waiting room for people who no longer bothered to show up. I'm ready, I said. It surprised me how calm I sounded. But something inside me had already made this decision long before tonight, perhaps even at the moment Mia's laughter filled the cold air around my fallen body. Arthur cleared his throat. Good. Then I'll need you to bring any financial records you have, especially anything showing money given to your son or granddaughter. I glanced at the folder beside me. I have plenty. And Helen. His voice softened. You deserve better than what they're giving you. I swallowed hard. I know. Come into my office tomorrow morning. When I hung up, the house seemed to shift. Not physically, emotionally, as if the walls themselves straightened with me. Upstairs, I heard Mia laughing again. Then Lucas's voice, irritated, tired, dismissive. I realized in that moment that nothing I did tonight, nothing I said, would matter to them. They expected me to wake up tomorrow the same woman I had always been. Quiet, yielding, grateful for scraps of affection. But tomorrow, I would walk into Arthur Cole's office with a bruise on my knee and proof in my hands. And for the first time in decades, I wouldn't be asking my family for respect. I'd be demanding it from the law. Arthur's office hadn't changed in 15 years. Same dark oak shelves, same framed certificates, same view of the courthouse across the street. A reminder that accountability was never as far away as people liked to pretend. When I stepped inside, he rose from behind his desk with the gentle stiffness of a man who had lived long enough to understand endurance. "Helen," he said, offering his hand. "Come sit. Take your time." I lowered myself into the chair, my knee protesting just enough to remind me why I was there. The folder lay on my lap, heavier today than it had felt last night. Or perhaps I finally understood its weight. Arthur sat carefully, adjusting his glasses. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to be clear. You are not wasting my time. What happened to you is serious, and the law does not take well to the humiliation of an elderly person, especially when there's evidence." I nodded, breathing in slowly. I had prepared myself for this conversation, yet emotion still fluttered beneath my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the folder and pushed it toward him. "There's more in here than just money," I said. "But that's part of it." He leafed through the papers with deliberate attention. Tuition bills, loan transfers, credit statements, medical payments. He paused at each one, his brows knitting tighter. "How long has this been going on?" he asked softly. "More than a decade," I answered. "Maybe longer. It's just that I only kept records for the last 10 years. "And they've never repaid any of it?" I shook my head. "Did they ever express gratitude?" I gave a small, sad smile. "Perhaps once, a long time ago, before giving became expected." He sighed, closing the folder gently. "Financial exploitation is one of the most common forms of elder abuse. Most never speak up. But you are speaking up, Helen. That matters more than you realize." I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly in my lap. It's strange how courage feels when you haven't used it in years, like wearing a coat that used to fit, but now feels unfamiliar on your shoulders. "And the video?" he asked. I pulled out my phone, already cued on the clip everyone had seen. My throat tightened when I pressed play. Even in a quiet office, Mia's laughter was unbearable. I watched my own body hit the steps, watched myself scramble, watched the indifference in her voice. Each second chipped away at the woman I had allowed myself to be. Arthur watched in silence, jaw tightening. When the clip ended, he remained still for several seconds before exhaling sharply. "That," he said, "is damning." I swallowed. "It was meant to be funny." "It isn't," he replied. "To anyone with a conscience." He leaned forward. "The judge will see this. And when he does, he won't be thinking about humor. He'll be thinking about negligence, emotional abuse, and your granddaughter's complete failure to provide aid when you were clearly in distress." I stared at my hands. She didn't even ask if I was hurt. "Helen," he said gently, "that video alone is enough to begin a case." A small shiver ran up my arms. Not fear, relief. Relief that finally, someone besides me saw the truth without explaining, without minimizing, without making me feel dramatic or fragile. Arthur continued. We'll file 2 motions. One for financial recovery. Your records are more than enough. The second for emotional harm and neglect. That will force the court to review the video formally. My pulse quickened. And Lucas? What happens to him? That depends, Arthur said. If he knowingly allowed this behavior or participated in any way in financial exploitation, he'll be included in the case. I didn't want to hurt my son. Even now, the thought bruised something tender inside me. But I also couldn't keep cushioning the fall of people who had no interest in softening mine. I'm not trying to ruin their lives, I whispered. Arthur's expression softened. You're trying to reclaim your own. There's a difference. For the first time since the fall, my chest loosened. Just enough to take a full breath. He slid the folder back to me. I'll need copies of everything. And if you're willing, I'd like you to write a detailed account of how they've treated you over the years. Dates, events, anything that stands out. I nodded again. I can do that. He stood, walking around the desk to rest a hand lightly on my shoulder. Helen, the law is on your side, and so am I. When I stepped out of his office, the cold air met my face like a blessing. Across the street, the courthouse windows glimmered in the late morning sun. A place I never imagined myself entering. A place where Mia's laughter would finally meet silence. And truth. When I got home from Arthur's office, the house felt strangely unfamiliar, as if I were walking into someone else's life. Perhaps, in a way, I was. The woman who had left that morning was not the same one who was turning her key now. My knees still ached, but it was a different kind of ache. Less from the fall, more from the weight I had finally decided to stop carrying. The living room sat in quiet disarray. Mia's jacket slung over a chair. Lucas's empty coffee mug staining my table, a trail of crumbs from someone too entitled to care where they fell. It struck me then how much of their mess I had cleaned over the years, literal and otherwise. I went to my desk, pulled out a clean notebook, and began writing as Arthur had instructed. At first, the words came slowly, not because I didn't remember, but because some memories resist being put on paper. They feel too heavy, too humiliating. But once the first few lines were written, more followed. Moments I had tucked away, moments I had excused, moments I had forgiven too easily. The time Mia told her friends I was basically the housemaid. The time Lucas yelled because I bought the wrong cereal, even though I'd paid for the groceries myself. The holidays they forgot to invite me until I reminded them. The afternoons Mia complained about driving me to doctor appointments I paid for. The looks my daughter-in-law gave me, sharp as pins, each one saying, "You are in the way." I wrote it all down. Every slight, every disappointment, every small betrayal that built the bridge to the moment Mia lifted her phone instead of her hands. When I finished, my handwriting looked foreign, shakier, different, as though the truth had traveled through me instead of from me. I stood to stretch, my hip catching with a dull click. I walked to the window and watched a pair of sparrows fight over a branch. Even birds know when their territory has been violated. Even they defend themselves. Behind me, the door opened. Mia walked in, phone in hand, expression guarded. She had probably gotten a text from her father. Mom went to a lawyer. She hovered in the doorway. "Grandma? Did you go somewhere this morning?" I turned slowly. "Yes." "Why?" "You didn't say anything. I didn't think you'd care." Her mouth twitched, a flash of guilt or annoyance passing over it. "Dad said you're upset about the video. He said you're blowing it out of proportion. Did he? I asked, my voice as calm as the still air in the room. She shifted. I mean, yeah, it wasn't that serious. I watched her closely, the way you study a painting you once thought you understood. Mia, have you watched the video? Really watched it? She shrugged, eyes sliding away. It's not a big deal. It is, to me. She didn't respond. I stepped closer. What if I'd broken a bone? What if I hadn't gotten up? Would you have posted that too? Her lips parted, but no sound came. She hadn't considered that. She hadn't considered me at all. I returned to my desk, gathering the papers into the folder Arthur would need. When I turned back, Mia was still watching me, uncertainty creeping into her face. What are you doing, Grandma? I closed the folder calmly, protecting myself. Her eyebrows shot up. From us? Yes, I said simply. She let out a nervous laugh. Come on, you're not serious. I am. She opened her mouth again, but before she could form another excuse, my phone buzzed. A message from Arthur. I'll prepare the filing. The judge will likely want to see the video firsthand. Mia must have seen the name on the screen. Her face changed, drained even. A girl who had laughed carelessly at a fall now suddenly understood gravity. Are you actually suing us? She whispered. I looked at her, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with a clarity sharpened by years of silence. I'm holding you accountable. She stared, stunned, as I walked past her toward the kitchen to boil water for tea. My knee hurt with every step, but it was good pain. Pain that meant I was moving. Pain that meant I was alive. Pain that meant I had finally chosen myself. In the hallway behind me, I heard Mia whisper, voice trembling for the first time. Dad? She's serious. Yes, I was. Lucas arrived less than an hour after Mia's frightened whisper upstairs. I heard his car before I saw it, tires crunching too hard over the gravel, the door slamming with the force of someone who thinks volume can replace reason. He didn't knock. He never knocked. He entered the house like a man walking into a crisis he believed was beneath him. Mom, he called sharply, we need to talk. His voice had that tone, accusation wrapped in urgency. The same tone he used when he wanted money, when he wanted help, when he wanted something from me he didn't dare name but took for granted all the same. I stepped out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a towel. I assumed we would. He stood in the doorway, jaw clenched, eyes darting toward the folder on the table like it was a weapon. Maybe it was. For once, I finally understood its power. What the hell are you thinking? He demanded. I'm thinking very clearly, I said. He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Mom, you can't just go to a lawyer because of a stupid video. I met his eyes. I didn't go because of the video. I went because of everything behind it. Mia hovered behind him, pale, shifting from foot to foot. She wasn't laughing now, not even close. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, pacing. You're overreacting. You're letting some lawyer put ideas in your head. You should have come to us instead of dragging the law into this. Come to you, I asked softly. Lucas, you haven't listened to me in years. That's not true, he snapped. It is, I said. You only hear me when it benefits you. His face changed, anger flickering into something uglier. So what? You're going to sue your own family, ruin your granddaughter's life because she made one mistake? Mia's eyes filled, not with remorse, but with fear. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She was scared of consequences. I'm not ruining her life, I said. I'm making sure mine isn't treated like it doesn't matter. Lucas slammed his hand onto the table. The papers trembled. You're insane if you think some judge will take this seriously. He will once he sees the video, I said, and the room went still. Mia swallowed hard. Lucas stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not the mother who always said yes, not the quiet figure in the corner of family gatherings, but a woman capable of standing. You wouldn't, he said. I would, I answered. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, think about what you're doing. Think about us, about the family. I felt a pang deep in my chest, an old wound, familiar and dull. I have thought about the family for decades. And where has it brought me? He didn't answer, so I did. To a house where no one respects me, to a life where I'm good enough to pay for things but not good enough to be treated with kindness, to a fall that my granddaughter found entertaining. Mia whispered, Grandma, please. I turned toward her. You hurt me, Mia, and you never even apologized. Her lips trembled. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't care to know. She flinched at that, not from cruelty, but from truth landing exactly where it needed to. Lucas exhaled through his teeth. Mom, look, just tell your lawyer to drop it. We'll delete the video, okay? It'll be gone. Everyone forgets things online. No, I said. This isn't about deleting a video. This is about recognizing what you've done, and neither of you has done that. He straightened, arms crossing over his chest. If you go through with this, don't expect us to keep helping you. Don't expect visits. Don't expect support. Support. A strange word from a man who had never carried anything for me except impatience. I'm not afraid of being alone, I said. I've been alone for a very long time. Mia let out a small, broken sound. Lucas stared at me for a long moment, anger and disbelief wrestling inside him. Finally, he said, You're choosing a lawsuit over your own family. I'm choosing myself, I whispered, for the first time in my life. The room fell completely still. Mia's breathing hitched. Lucas blinked, stunned. I picked up the folder and held it close to me, not out of fear, but out of certainty. Now, I said gently, please leave. I have work to prepare for tomorrow. Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. He grabbed his jacket, motioned for Mia to follow, and walked toward the door with heavy, reluctant steps. Just before stepping outside, he turned back. You'll regret this. I shook my head. No, Lucas. I regret staying silent this long. The door closed behind them. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, in a way that felt peaceful, not empty. And I realized something profound. They weren't angry because I stood up. They were angry because they never expected I could. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not from pain this time, but from a strange calmness spreading through me like warm light. A steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet house, and realized I no longer feared that silence. It felt earned. I dressed slowly, choosing a soft gray sweater and the pearl earrings George once gave me. Not for anyone else, just to remind myself that I had once been loved properly, by someone who never laughed at my pain. That memory steadied me more than the strongest cane ever could. I spent the early hours gathering everything Arthur asked for. The records, the receipts, the copy of my written account. Each paper felt like a stone taken out of a heavy sack I'd carried too long. By the time I finished, My shoulders felt lighter, even if my knee complained. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. "We need to talk. Don't do anything until you hear me out." I stared at it for a long moment. The old version of me, the one they relied on, would have answered immediately, softening my tone, smoothing the edges, trying to keep the peace. But peace that demands silence isn't peace at all. I placed the phone face down on the table and continued sorting the documents. A few minutes later, another message. "Mom, this is serious. Call me back." Yes, I thought. It is serious. That's why I'm not calling. By noon, I had everything ready in a neat stack. Truth arranged in chronological order. The house felt unusually still, like it was holding its breath with me. I made myself tea, though my hands trembled just slightly as I poured the water. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it shakes, but moves forward anyway. I carried the documents to the living room and sat in my usual chair. The afternoon light fell across my lap, warming the papers. Outside, a few children rode bikes down the street, their laughter bright and unburdened. I wondered when laughter had become something that frightened me. Then the doorbell rang, not timid, not uncertain, sharp and insistent. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I opened the door to find Lucas standing there, breathless, jaw tight, eyes full of something between anger and desperation. Behind him, Mia sat in the car, shoulders hunched, staring at her hands. "Mom," Lucas said, stepping forward, "you can't go through with this. You can't just drag your family into court." "I haven't dragged anyone," I said calmly. "Your actions brought us here." He shook his head, pacing, his frustration almost frantic. "Do you understand what this will do? To Mia? To me? To all of us? You're going to destroy our reputation." I studied him quietly. "Your concern seems to be reputation, not what you did." "That video was a mistake," he snapped. "No," I said. "Posting it was a mistake. Laughing was a choice." He looked away, jaw tightening further. I continued, my voice steady. "I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I will no longer allow you to treat me as disposable." "Mom, no, Lucas. I've listened to you talk over me for years. Now you'll listen to me." He stopped pacing. "You don't get to harm someone and decide for them how hurt they should feel. You don't get to call it small because it wasn't small to you." For a moment, he looked as if he might argue again. Then his shoulders sagged, a flicker of uncertainty breaking through his anger. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. There it was, the question he should have asked years ago. "I want my dignity back," I said. "And I want the law to see what you've done since you refused to." His eyes darkened. "So nothing I say will change your mind?" "Not unless you can go back in time and undo all of it." He didn't answer, perhaps because he finally understood he had run out of excuses. I stepped aside slightly. "I have an appointment with Arthur this afternoon. Please leave. I need to prepare." Lucas stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then he nodded once, sharply, and turned away. When he reached the car, Mia lifted her eyes to me, wide, uncertain, frightened. For the first time, she looked like the child I once knew. They drove off without another word. When the car disappeared around the corner, I exhaled and closed the door behind me. The house was quiet again, but this time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. Something I should have claimed long ago. The courthouse lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a scent that reminded me of libraries and promises. Arthur walked beside me, steady and calm, carrying the folder that now felt less like evidence and more like armor. I had slept poorly, but oddly enough, I felt stronger than I had in years. Pain wakes you, but purpose keeps you standing. We reached a small conference room where preliminary hearings were held. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above us. My hands tightened around the strap of my purse, not from fear, but from the weight of what this room represented. For decades, I had given my family all the power. Today, I was taking some back. A few minutes later, Lucas and Mia entered with their attorney, a tall man with a sharp suit and a sharper expression. Lucas avoided my eyes. Mia looked pale, as though she had stepped into water far deeper than she ever expected. Their attorney spoke first. "Mrs. Ward, we're hoping to resolve this without escalation. This is a family matter, not a legal one." I met his gaze evenly. It became a legal matter the moment my granddaughter filmed my fall and treated it like entertainment. Mia flinched visibly. Her attorney continued, pressing his lips into a polite smile. "The video was a lapse in judgment. She's young." Arthur answered before I could. "Youth excuses mistakes, not cruelty, and the financial records speak for themselves." The opposing attorney shifted, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Let's not dramatize this. Our goal is reconciliation." Reconciliation. The word tasted like dust. Arthur opened the folder and slid the video evidence forward. "Before we discuss reconciliation, I suggest you actually watch what you're defending." The attorney sighed, clicked the file open on his tablet, and hit play. The room filled with the harsh sound of my fall, the thud, the scrape of wood, the involuntary cry I hadn't realized escaped my lips. But the worst part was Mia's laughter, bright and merciless, echoing off the sterile walls. In this quiet room, it sounded even uglier. Lucas stared at the table, jaw clenched. Mia covered her mouth, tears pooling despite herself. The attorney watched the clip twice, his face tightening with each second. When he finally set the tablet down, something uncertain flickered behind his practiced professionalism. "Well," he said slowly, "the optics are unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" I repeated softly. "That's the word you choose." Arthur leaned forward. "A judge won't call it unfortunate. He'll call it neglect. He'll call it emotional harm, and he may call it elder abuse." Silence followed, thick and uneasy. For the first time, Mia looked at me, not with teenage irritation, not with careless superiority, but with something I hadn't seen in years: fear, understanding, and the faintest spark of shame. "Grandma," she whispered, voice trembling, I didn't think—" "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Lucas finally spoke. "Mom, please, we can fix this. Just tell your lawyer to withdraw the claims." Arthur folded his hands. "Mr. Ward, your mother is not here to be intimidated or rushed. The court process will continue unless she explicitly requests otherwise." They all turned to me. For a moment, I let the weight of their eyes rest on my shoulders. Then I exhaled slowly, letting years of quiet suffering drift away like dust in sunlight. "I'm not withdrawing anything," I said. "Not until the judge sees the truth in full." Mia covered her face. Lucas stared at me in disbelief, as if the woman sitting before him could not possibly be the same mother who once softened every blow life dealt him. But I was the same woman. He had simply forgotten what I was made of. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Not unfriendly, just serious, like a place built to hold the weight of truth without letting it slip away. The judge entered, A man with silver hair and a gaze that saw through pretense the way winter sees through thin curtains. Everyone rose, everyone sat, and suddenly it was real. My hands rested on my lap, one folded over the other. They were steady. I was grateful for that. Arthur began. He spoke clearly, not angrily, not theatrically, just presenting facts, the way a good man presents weather before a storm. He described the fall, the laughter, the posting, the financial history, the pattern. I listened to it all without flinching. When you've lived something, hearing it spoken aloud feels almost gentle. Then Lucas's attorney stood, smoothing his expensive tie as though it could straighten the truth with him. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding, an unfortunate moment blown out of proportion. The granddaughter meant no harm. The judge lifted a brow. I'll decide what's in proportion once I've reviewed the evidence. When Arthur cued the video, the bailiff dimmed the lights slightly. My heart beat once, hard, against my ribs. I looked down, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to see it again. I had already lived every frame, but I heard it. The hollow thud of my body hitting the wooden steps, my breath catching, the stunned silence afterward, and then Mia's laughter, high, unrestrained, delighted, a sound that, in this quiet room, became a confession. When the clip ended, the screen froze on the moment I was sprawled on the porch, the camera angled down at me like I wasn't human. No one spoke. The judge removed his glasses, set them on the bench, and folded his hands. Miss Ward, he said, turning to Mia, stand. Mia rose slowly, trembling. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Did you film this? He asked. Yes, she whispered. Did you laugh? She nodded, tears spilling before she could hide them. Yes. Did you render aid? Her voice cracked. I didn't think she was hurt. That, the judge interrupted, is not an answer. Mia's knees wobbled. No, sir. The judge's eyes softened only slightly, the way a seasoned doctor softens before delivering a hard truth. Miss Ward, the elderly are not entertainment. The fact that you responded with amusement rather than assistance is deeply concerning. Lucas shifted, as if trying to stand tall enough to shield her. The judge wasn't interested. He turned next to Lucas. And you, Mr. Ward, did you know the extent of your mother's financial support for your household? Lucas hesitated. It was the longest second of his life. Some of it. Arthur rose. We have documentation showing he knew all of it. The judge nodded slowly, as though confirming a suspicion he'd had since the moment he walked in. Then you, too, bear responsibility for the ongoing pattern of neglect. Lucas's face drained of color. The judge leaned back, taking in all of us. Mrs. Ward, his voice gentled, I want you to know that this court recognizes what has happened here. This is not a simple family disagreement. This is harm. Documented, repeated, and avoidable harm. I swallowed hard. My eyes stung, but I did not cry. This wasn't sorrow. This was acknowledgement. Before I issue my decision, he said, I want to make one thing clear. The room seemed to hold its breath. No one has the right to reduce another person's dignity. Not by laughter, not by exploitation, not by silence. He looked at Mia once more, and she dropped her head, sobbing quietly. For the first time since the fall, I felt something loosen in my chest, like air finally reaching a place that had been tight for years. The judge straightened his papers. I will now prepare the ruling. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the weight shift. Not vanish, just move enough that I could breathe again. It wasn't victory yet, but it was justice beginning to take shape. The judge returned after a short recess, though time in that room seemed to stretch in a way only tension can make it. Mia sat hunched beside her father, her shoulders trembling with the kind of fear that appears only when someone finally realizes the world is larger and less forgiving than they believed. Lucas stared straight ahead, jaw set, but even from across the room I could see the faint pulse in his neck, quick and unsteady. The judge cleared his throat. Everyone rose, then sat again. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at the papers before him, and began to speak in a tone that was calm, but carried the weight of stone. After reviewing the evidence, he said, "This court finds substantial grounds to conclude that Mrs. Ward has been subjected to repeated emotional neglect, humiliation, and financial exploitation." The words settled over the room like dust over old wood, soft, but impossible to ignore. The judge continued, turning first toward Mia. "As for the video, its recording and public posting demonstrate a disturbing lack of empathy and responsibility. Miss Ward, your actions are not merely immature. They represent a failure to offer aid to an elderly person in distress and a deliberate decision to treat suffering as amusement." Mia's tears fell freely now. She didn't wipe them. She didn't speak. She just stared at her hands, as if hoping they could pull her back from the moment she'd created. "Given your age," the judge said, "the court is opting for corrective action rather than punitive. You will complete a mandatory community service program focused on elder care, as well as a structured educational course on cyber ethics and the consequences of public humiliation." Her breath hitched. She nodded, barely audible. "Yes, sir." Then the judge turned to Lucas. "Mr. Ward, the financial records your mother provided paint a troubling picture of dependency and disregard. The court recognizes a pattern of sustained financial exploitation." Lucas's face hardened. "Your Honor, I never—" "This is not the moment for protest," the judge cut sharply. "You accepted significant monetary support from your mother, without repayment, without acknowledgement, and without ensuring her well-being in return. That is exploitation." He fell silent. His arrogance had finally met something immovable. The judge folded his hands. "Therefore, this court orders the following." He read each point slowly, clearly. "A formal repayment plan to Mrs. Ward covering a portion of the financial support documented. Restriction of any future access to her accounts, assets, or property without legal oversight. A temporary protective order ensuring Mrs. Ward is not subjected to coercion, harassment, or undue influence." Lucas's mouth tightened, but he didn't speak again. Then the judge looked at me, directly, steadily, without pity. "Mrs. Ward," he said, "this ruling recognizes your right to dignity, safety, and respect. You have shown remarkable restraint and clarity in bringing this case forward. The law stands with you." For a moment, my breath caught, not from sadness, not from triumph, from the simple, quiet recognition that after years of being dismissed, minimized, and laughed at, someone finally saw me fully. The judge rose, signaling the session was over. The bailiff called the room to order. Chairs pushed back. Papers rustled. Footsteps shuffled toward the doors. I remained seated for a moment longer, feeling the weight lift, slowly, gently, like a curtain that had been drawn for years finally letting in a sliver of light. When I did stand, my knee reminded me I was still human, still aging, still fragile in some ways. But my back was straight, my steps steady. As I walked past Lucas and Mia, neither spoke. Mia's eyes were red, swollen, frightened. Lucas's expression hovered somewhere between resentment and something softer he didn't know how to show. I didn't stop. I didn't glare. I didn't comfort them. I simply walked by, carrying with me the thing they never expected me to reclaim: my worth. And it felt quieter than victory, but stronger than forgiveness. The house felt different when I returned that afternoon. Not larger, not brighter, simply mine again. For years, it had felt like a place I loaned to other people, a place where my kindness gathered in corners like dust no one bothered to sweep. Now, as I set my purse down and hung my coat, I felt something settle inside me with a quiet finality. I had been heard. I had been seen. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The sun had dipped low, painting the living room in shades of gold and ash. I stood there for a moment, letting the stillness fold around me. My husband's photograph sat on the mantel, his familiar smile steady and warm. I touched the frame lightly. "Well, George," I murmured. I finally stopped letting them knock me down. My knee protested as I eased into my chair, but today even the pain felt honest, like a reminder of everything I had survived. The judge's words echoed gently in my mind: dignity, safety, respect. Words that had grown foreign in this house but no longer unreachable. I was halfway through making tea when a soft knock came at the door. Not Lucas. Not the heavy-handed slam he favored. Not the impatient tapping of my daughter-in-law. A hesitant knock, almost shy. When I opened the door, Mia stood there alone. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders small beneath her coat. For the first time since she was little, she looked unsure of her place in my doorway. "Grandma," she whispered, the word trembling out of her like something fragile. I stepped back slightly to let her choose whether to enter. She did, slowly, as if afraid the floor might reject her. We stood in the hallway, me steady, her unraveling. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Everything I think of sounds stupid or too late." "Then say something true," I said quietly. She swallowed hard. I hurt you. And I didn't even realize how badly. I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought it was just a joke. I didn't see you. Not really." That admission, small as it was, slipped into the room like a shy apology. She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I'm scared," she whispered. "The judge. The service hours. Dad's angry. And She looked up at me, eyes filled with a pain I recognized too well. "I don't want you to hate me." I let out a slow breath. "I don't hate you, Mia, but I won't protect you from the consequences of what you did." She nodded, tears falling again. "I know. I wish I had thought before I laughed." "So do I said. "But wishing doesn't undo anything. Only action does." We moved to the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch, like a child unsure whether she was allowed to touch anything, her hands twisted nervously. "Grandma, is there any way to fix this?" I looked at her, not the girl who mocked my pain, but the one who once held my hand crossing the street, the one who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. "You can't erase what happened," I said softly. "But you can choose who you become after it." She nodded slowly, the truth settling into her like a stone dropped into water, rippling, shifting, reshaping. We sat in silence for a long moment, not tense, not accusing, just two people trying to meet each other honestly for the first time in years. "I am going to complete everything the court ordered," she said finally. "All of it. Even if Dad says it's unfair." "Good," I said, and she flinched. Not from harshness, but because she wasn't used to me expecting anything of her. She looked around the room then, as if seeing it as something she'd overlooked. Her voice softened. "I don't want to lose you, Grandma. You lost the version of me who stayed quiet," I said gently. "But I'm still here." Her lip trembled. Can I come visit? Not now, but later, when you're ready." I considered her words. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because granting access to someone who once misused it requires caution, not cruelty. "Maybe someday," I said, "when trust has roots again." She nodded, accepting it without argument. When she rose to leave, she hesitated in the doorway. "Thank you for not slamming the door in my face." I met her eyes. "Thank you for knocking." She managed a small, broken smile, then stepped out into the evening air. The door closed softly behind her. The house was quiet again, but now the quiet felt like peace, not emptiness. I sat back down, wrapped my hands around my warm mug, and let myself breathe. There was still one chapter left in this story, and for once, it belonged entirely to me. I woke the next morning to a quiet house and a clear mind. For years, mornings had carried a heaviness with them, a dread I could never quite name. But today, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner, as though someone had cracked a window in a room that had been sealed for too long. I made tea and sat by the window. The bruise on my knee had begun to fade, a slow retreat from purple to yellow. Healing never looks graceful, but it does come. I traced a gentle circle around it, surprised by how calm I felt. Pain had been my companion for so long that peace felt almost unfamiliar, like an old friend returning after years apart. I spent the afternoon tidying the house, not because anyone was coming, but because I wanted to live among things that felt cared for. I folded blankets, watered plants, opened the curtains wide. Sunlight warmed the floorboards, and for the first time in ages, I let myself enjoy the quiet without fearing what it meant. When the mail arrived, I found a small envelope addressed in Mia's handwriting. The lines were uneven, hesitant. Inside was a simple note. "I'm trying, Grandma. I hope someday you'll see it." I held the paper for a long moment. Not smiling, not crying, just letting the honesty of it settle. Trying was not enough to erase what had happened, but trying was more than I had seen from her in years, and maybe that was the beginning of something, small, careful, but real. Later, I stepped outside onto the porch, the same place where everything had changed. The evening breeze was cool against my face. I stood there, feeling the soft give of the wood beneath my feet, and I realized something important. I wasn't standing in the shadow of that fall anymore. I had risen from it. And though I didn't know what my relationship with my family would look like in the months ahead, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was no longer living a life shaped by their disregard. I had carved out space for myself again, space they had not been permitted to fill. As the sun dipped low, I whispered a quiet promise to the woman I used to be. I won't disappear again. And to the woman I was now. You did well. If anyone ever finds themselves where I once stood, small, dismissed, swallowed by silence, I hope they remember this. You have the right to stand. You have the right to be heard. And you are never too old to reclaim your dignity. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. Quiet truths travel farther than we think.